Good morning and welcome to Delta EE's webinar. Thank you for everyone that posted in the questions. We were having a few problems this morning and I think we've been talking to you since about 10 past 10 to welcome you all, and I don't think any of you have heard that. So welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining. We're going to kickstart now. We've still got a few more people joining. For anyone late attending, we're just going to continue. You can get the slides and see the full recording afterwards anyway. So today we're looking at the battleground for flexibility, and we're going to look at the battleground for residential flexibility. This was part of a two-part webinar series. The first one we did a month ago now, and we looked at commercial and industrial flexibility. Anyone interested in that, just let me know. So let's dive straight in. So I'm Philippa Hardy, PIP for short. I'm a senior analyst at Delta EE, so I'll be one of the speakers today. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues.
Good morning everyone, my name is Scott Bryant. I'm an analyst at Delta Energy and Environment, and I'm predominantly involved in energy services innovation, looking at new and innovative business models in the energy space, in addition to heat pump research.
And good morning everyone, my name is Julian Janssen. I lead Delta Energy and Environment's research on energy storage, so there's a bit of input from me today as well. So let's start the webinar then.
Okay, so the structure for today is we're going to dive straight in and look at the sources of residential flexibility, and the core focus really for today is going to be around how is residential flexibility being exploited today. And then at the end we're going to have a look at the battleground, so who are the key players, what types of companies, and yeah, where that's going to go.
So to start us off, a lot of you might know us already, but for those of you who do not know us, we just thought we'll quickly introduce Delta Energy and Environment. So as you can see on the slide here, on this little bubble diagram, Delta E's core expertise, or our core focus really, is on the customer end of the value chain. And our mission is to help companies navigate the transformation of our energy system. And really what we're seeing or witnessing in the energy space momentarily is that we're moving towards a more distributed, low-carbon, customer-centric and service-orientated energy system. And really it's helping companies through a number of types of works that you can see on the slide here to navigate this transformation. And some of our selected clients are shown in the box on the bottom right. And primarily we work with energy companies and product manufacturers, but we are increasingly working with new entrants into the energy market, for example, telecommunication companies or insurance companies. And we're also doing a lot more work with network companies for whom this topic is certainly relevant as well.
So just a quick overview of what we tend to get up to here at Delta Energy and Environment for our clients. It's a mix of research and consultancy work. So we tend to use our consultancy work to address bespoke and key problems that are specific to particular clients based on our technical and market expertise. And this is often channels into and is also driven by our research for specific topic areas, which we split over digital and services innovation, distributed generation and demand side flexibility, as we'll be discussing today, and also heat. And so we find it's quite a symbiotic relationship. Our research subscription services for our subscribers drives our expertise that we can then use for consultancy, and our expertise and findings from successful projects in consultancy tends to drive our research subscription services. And in addition to this, we often like to gather people in particular spaces, be it experts in heat pumps, heating, digital and connected spaces together, and just essentially facilitate discussion and further networking opportunities via annual summits that we hold.
Okay, so let's look now into the sources of residential flexibility and get right on with the presentation. So flexibility, for the purpose of this webinar, I just want to cut through the flexibility jargon, if you like. There's quite a lot out there. And for the purpose of this webinar, flexibility for us includes demand response in the forms you can see there, virtual power plants, smart grids and load shedding. A simple illustration just to again define flexibility for the purpose of this webinar. So to illustrate, we have load generator battery, so from some form of flexibility, capacity on one side of the meter, and on the other side of the meter we have the electricity and energy markets. So in one direction, flexibility or capacity is offered in return for obviously price signals. And what do we mean by price signals? Well, today I've grouped them into 5 key areas, and we will be touching on these 5 areas as we go through the webinar to show you exactly who's taking advantage or using which price signal. So the price signals largely are around balancing services or ancillary services, energy supplier or time of use tariffs where they're available, self-consumption and network charges, as well as capacity markets. So residential loads. There's again 5 broad sources of residential flexibility that we'll be focusing on today, going from the smallest end, lights and electrical appliances, right all the way up to storage, electric vehicles and those that have quite a lot of flexibility. But it's not all about the types of loads. To make residential flexibility work, you really need some key enablers in place. And these are the enablers that we think are in place today and will continue to increase over time. So the first is scale. You obviously need scale for residential flexibility to work. It's not like industrial or commercial flexibility where one big metal smelter will provide a significant flexibility. You know, you really need hundreds of thousands of assets connected. And of course, to do this, it needs to be low or zero cost. Otherwise, it will make the proposition quite challenging. The second enabler is customers. Now, we need to have a positive impact on customers. Again, quite different to industrial type flexibility where customer comfort, peace of mind and other sort of unquantifiable factors aren't really at play. We really need to take the customers on this journey and provide flexibility whilst not impacting the warmth in their home, for example. The third is connectivity, increasingly important, and we will be coming back to this later on in the webinar. So these 5 residential loads, that they're already out there on the market, but it's connecting them and having them to be connected that makes them truly useful for extracting flexibility. Now they need to be connected in some way. There's a few different ways we can do this. For example, retrofitting controls or building it into appliances, or even just enabling connectivity through open type protocols. And again, we'll come back to this later. The fourth enabler is tools or market mechanisms, and we need these mechanisms to enable value from flexibility. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago that we are seeing these enablers in place today, and a few examples. So market rules, they are opening up in some markets. So Ireland and Finland, for example, there are pilots for resident or homes to provide flexibility. Connectivity is increasing. The age of the Internet of Things is here. People are more engaged with energy and connected homes, for example. Consumer awareness is increasing. The age of the prosumer is here. There's much more engagement from consumers. And scale as well. There's huge growth in the electrification of heat. Through our other services, we forecast the evolution of heat pumps as well as storage. And of course, electric vehicles as well are increasingly popular. Take Norway, for example, or other countries that are moving in that direction. So what I'm really trying to demonstrate is these enablers are happening today in the market. It's not a tomorrow market. This research is a hot topic. People are looking into it. And today we really want to show you that what's really happening today, how people are extracting value from residential flexibility now. We don't really want to future gaze anymore, and we want to take you with us on that journey.
Yeah, Pip, you'd probably say that this is some of the interesting findings we've been coming across in our work with flexibility, and sort of just wanting to share the the key points that we're coming across as key for flexibility in residential areas, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is really, really exciting stuff. I think for all of us sat here, to be honest, we've pulled together some really interesting case studies, and we're pretty excited to, share with you guys. This is what we're seeing. It's happening today. So, before we kickstart, we want to have a quick-fire poll. 2 questions for you, and it's about which loads and how much. So, which loads will be providing the most flexibility, and then secondly, what proportion of homes will be providing flexibility. So it's going to be a very quick question. We're not going to spend much time on this. So the poll is up there. Select one answer. So which loads will be providing the most flexibility in 2020? Put your answers in now.
It looks like it's a fairly even split at the moment, although I guess many of you are still getting on and voting, but at the moment it does look like it's a split between storage and electric vehicles that are coming out as your key firm favourites for flexibility in 2020 and beyond.
Well, I don't know, HVAC is catching up a little bit though, and we've even got a few in electrical appliances that's creeping up.
And we've got about 80% of you voting now, so if you want to cast your vote, do it quickly because we'll be closing the poll anytime soon to get on with the next question as well. So give you 5 more seconds to cast your vote, please.
And I think for those of you who have cast your opinion today, we're quite happy to take your questions at the end if you have any particular pet questions you'd like to ask about these particular topics, or we're happy to chat and follow up after the webinar and discuss further. It sounds like you all have quite some insight into this.
Right, so we just closed the poll. Let's go to the next poll straight away, and then we'll share the answers afterwards. So the next question is, again, in 2020, what proportion of homes in Europe will be providing residential flexibility? Now, we were going to ask the question globally, but we thought we'll go for Europe first. We could do the global question on our part 3 of our webinar. So we're trying to really, how big do you think residential flexibility is going to be in 4 years' time, in 2020? It's kind of a pinnacle year for quite a lot of legislation, quite a lot of evolution of heating appliances.
Yeah, certainly. And the key question is really about, is residential flexibility going to be a mass market application? Will 1 in 10 homes be exploiting the value that this provides, or is it really going to be a niche thing happening, maybe even in less than 1 in 10,000 homes? So really very few residential customers being engaged with residential flexibility. So it's quite interesting to see what you are voting here.
Yeah, it looks like quite an interesting split. I guess there are a few that are not so optimistic about the role of residential homes in flexibility markets, but at the same time a vast majority of you think that could be quite significant, with at least 1 in 1,000, if not more, being involved in generating value from flexibility in some form or another.
Okay, great. So time is up. Let's close that poll. And now let's go back to the first poll that we asked the question in 2020, which loads will be providing the most flexibility? And let's just share these results with you now. So this is what everyone thought. So absolutely 0% think lighting is going to be the way forward for residential flexibility. But top of the pops, storage. Julian, storage manager here at Delta, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think it's certainly going to be it is a hot topic right now, and we've looked at it in a couple of webinars already, and I think some of the case studies we'll be looking at today will look at this in more detail. But we can really see that both HVAC and electric vehicles are almost the same percentage of votes. So it seems like people are a bit undecided, or really it's all 3 that will together provide this flexibility.
Yeah, I guess that reality is that there is typically no one solution and no one value chain that's the optimal. It all depends on you and your business. So it's good to see that people aren't all piling into one or the other, but
absolutely
keeping their minds open.
And lots of interest around electrical appliances, which I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, smart appliances, we're seeing more and more, or smart grid-ready appliances. So, yeah, an interesting area. Right, let's go to the second question. So in 2020, what proportion of homes in Europe will be providing flexibility? Let's just share this with you now. So, interesting. Some optimistic out there and some quite pessimistic.
But on the whole, I think, as is probably expected, everyone thinks that it will certainly be playing a role in come 5 years' time. But at the same time, the level of scale is certainly undecided. And I guess it really does come down to what business models and what innovations people are coming up with to be able to provide comfort and convenience to homeowners, which can then extract value from flexibility.
And business models being a core aspect of the energy services innovation, which Scott manages, and we're going to be talking about that a bit later in respect to residential flexibility. So hopefully agreeing with some of you on this poll. Right, without further ado, let's continue into the rest of the webinar. Let's just continue to the next slide here. So let's get right into the juicy bit, which is how is residential flexibility being exploited today? So I showed you the loads earlier. So we're going to start with storage and work our way down to lights or lighting. And we're really going to show you examples that are happening today. And I mentioned these 5 value streams earlier. So we're going to look at, okay, for each type of load, how is it extracting value? And we'll be using this framework for the rest of the presentation. So handing over to Julian now to start us off with the storage.
Thanks a lot for that, Pip. So yeah, as we saw in the poll just now, a lot of you think that energy storage will be one of the key resources for providing flexibility in the residential space. And you know what we can see happening is that in the energy storage space is really happening already. Companies are bringing out new value propositions. They're fast emerging. Lots of players are piling into this, and it's not just about providing energy storage, but it's providing more. And residential flexibility is a core aspect to that proposition. And we've thought about hard and long about what we should show you today, and we've decided to show you a specific example from Germany, which is Sonnen. Now Sonnen is one of the market leaders for residential energy storage in Germany. Specifically, let's make sure we don't create confusion, battery storage. Really what they're driving is quite an expansive strategy, and in Germany they have now started what they call the Sonnen community. And you know, to boil this down to the core, what does the Sonnen community provide? It provides a platform that allows for sharing of energy between residential customers who have PV on their roof, so they're generating their own electricity, and they can share this with other community members. And they also include other generators such as biogas plants in order to balance the overall community capacity. And really what it does today is provide a self-consumption value to the customer, because the core benefit remains increasing self-consumption of your PV electricity with your battery storage system. But you're also increasing the theoretical consumption of your solar power by sharing it with other community members rather than just dumping it on the grid. And what we also see is that this type of model is very well positioned to take advantage of further values emerging. So ultimately, Sonnen is becoming an energy supplier as part of the community, surpassing the traditional supply chain, and can integrate new things such as providing frequency response if they wanted to, or providing time of use tariffs to their customers. But this is not what's happening right now, but this is something that could happen in the future. Now, what's quite important to say is that Sonnen isn't the only player doing this type of thing or creating this type of value proposition. There's lots of emerging business models out there, especially in the German market, but also in other countries. And one example we've already showcased in one of our other services in the energy storage research service is Phenicon working together with the software provider Ampart. And they're already providing primary control reserve in Switzerland. And their really long-term vision is to exploit a whole range of residential flexibility. And you know, what we also see is not just battery storage, but there's other type of energy storage that's out there. For example, thermal energy storage. And the company exploiting this is VCharge, both in the US, but also over here in Europe. And to make it very simple, They take electric loads behind the meter, such as electric storage heaters, hot water tanks, and potentially in the future electric vehicles. They add smart control elements, aggregate these via their own power management platform, and then provide flexibility. And they're already doing so in PJM in the United States, providing frequency regulation, but also over here in the UK. So showing the important thing here is how they're extracting that value and how they're sharing this value. So they're generating revenue from trading in these markets. They're providing flexibility to the system, but they're also sharing this benefit with the customer, either through a financial benefit, they're giving them free smart controls as well, but also they're increasing comfort. And this leads us quite nicely to the next part of the webinar, because especially in the HVAC sector, this comfort and control element is becoming increasingly important.
Absolutely, and there's a fantastic example of this in Switzerland at the moment, and TECO, and many of you have heard about these before. There is a joint venture between Swisscom and Repower, a Swiss-based utility, and they work with customers across Switzerland and control thousands of electric heating systems via on-off commands to offer balancing services to the Swiss system operator. So, it might sound simple, but there are a few aspects to this that really impress us. First of all, they work with already installed electric heating, and they keep the cost low to access these types of loads by retrofitting quite a simple control box and use mobile communication and a simple on-off control. Secondly, through learning about each individual electric or how the electric heating system operates and correlating this against weather, they can really well predict how much they can interrupt a system's operation without interrupting customers' comfort. So again, really on that customer comfort side, and that's really the third point. So TECO are really quite customer centric, keeping the customer in the middle of their proposition. And again, the picture of the control app here, it's very easy on the eyes, it's very easy to use, and for customers it gives them control over their heating system too. So I've already mentioned how TECO extracts value is providing flexibility through balancing services to the Swiss system operator. And I think that's interesting in itself, because there's quite a lot of stakeholders today that think that actually there's no value that can be taken from balancing services for residential loads.
And Pip, sorry, just to jump in, would you say it's quite interesting as an example of a big player from outside the energy space coming in and getting involved in something that others have shied away from, who are more traditional energy players, and the risk here being they've already got 6,500 customers. They're the biggest, have the biggest access to flexibility load in the residential sector in Switzerland at the moment, and the key risk is that they're taking customers away from traditional energy players.
Absolutely. They're from a telecoms background. They're nimble, they're flexible, they're coming in, they're shaking up the market. Energy suppliers, watch out. I think it's one of them. They're proving that it works. They're creating value. They've got a lot of interest, and they're using current loads. They're not waiting for tomorrow's loads. They're not waiting for connectable loads. They're using the loads today, which I think is really special. On the same note, actually, we are seeing new players come into this market. Another example of this is Tempest Energy in the UK. Again, we really like this example because they're doing something different, really. They're challenging the energy supply kind of framework in the UK and exploiting value and flexibility in different ways to the rest of the examples in this webinar, actually. So the clues here in how do they extract value, it's not through balancing services like the TECO example we've just looked at. And of course, time of use tariffs aren't yet available, or in the UK anyway. So what they're doing is they're creating flexibility. So I've got a diagram courtesy of Tempest here to try and help us explain that. So they found a way to use flexibility across the supply chain. So they optimise each part, the wholesale, the transmission and the distribution. So as we all know, the price of each of these aspects, so wholesale, distribution, transmission, it does vary with time. Sometimes it's cheap, sometimes it's expensive, very simply put. And what Tempus are doing are they're dynamically shifting the customer demand or consumption, and typically at the moment for those with electric heating systems. And they're shifting this consumption into cheaper time periods, using their software and algorithms to determine, okay, well, how much can we shift and which time period should we shift to and when. So this is really helping Tempus to reduce their kind of energy supply costs. So they shift demand to cheaper times and buy energy at lower costs. And obviously they share the benefit with the customer, which is very nice. So customers get a reduced electricity tariff, one of the cheapest in the UK at the moment.
I don't think I'd sniff at that, would you?
Absolutely not. So really, really competitive model, and yeah, another interesting one for the energy supply in the UK. But I guess next up is really, electrical appliances and lights. So are they happening today, Scott? Are they happening tomorrow? What's going on in the market?
Well, Pip, I think that is a very good question. So what's typically considered a future opportunity by many, we see as untapped potential today. There are solutions that are investigating this today. So there are large electrical appliances and lighting. They represent a large volume of disaggregated loads available across the whole residential sector. And if we take a look at electrical appliances today, there is no clear approach for how people should be generating value from flexibility. It still seems to be a question people are wrestling with. But firms are certainly laying the groundwork for how to try and tackle this approach for using electrical appliances on a large volume scale to tap into flexibility. And an example I wanted to talk about today was bundles. So Bundles is a Netherlands, so a Dutch-based company, and they're not explicitly tapping into the flexibility market just yet, but they've built this into their product. So the idea is they're offering customers a pay-as-you-go package for what's considered quite a high, if varying, load in the household, your washing machine. So instead of having an old, clunky, cheap washing machine that's costing you money, you have to buy it, go to the effort of installing it and maintaining it, they're offering you, in partnership with Miele, a high-quality upfront product for free. You pay per wash, and the idea is they've inbuilt into this smart remote monitoring capability that's accessible via an internet-based hub built into this system as an add-on to the typical Miele washing machine. And the idea is, at the moment, they're focusing on customer comfort and convenience and saving them money by reducing the upfront capital cost, and at the same time having ongoing savings by having a high-quality product, with the idea that in the background, as they ramp up this rollout to larger numbers of customers, they already have the framework in place for tapping into the flexibility of these loads, potentially shifting or recommending that they shift the loads into different time periods to make use of the potential flexibility that a large network of bundles customers could be. Now, Netherlands doesn't represent a particularly high flexibility market today, but with this model, it certainly represents something that could be rolled out Europe-wide. It's simple. Just about everyone has a washing machine in their home, and I'm sure many of you would actually enjoy having a high-quality Miele washing machine rather than your cheap knockoff.
Well, I guess the other thing with Netherlands as well, with the recent government announcement of electrification of heat, the big gas market, but going towards electrifying heat, you can see that maybe the flexibility markets will open up there as well, and then bundles becomes an even more attractive proposition in the Netherlands as well as other markets.
Definitely, Pimp. I think it's a watch this space for the Netherlands in the coming years.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, I guess off the back of electrical appliances is probably in the residential sector the most overlooked opportunity for flexibility today would be lighting. So I guess lighting's already considered quite a reasonably big flexibility opportunity in the commercial industrial space due to inefficient use and timing of these large volumes of lighting that are potentially considered quite wasteful. But In the residential sector, I guess it's not quite so convenient for people because I don't think any of you out there would be so appreciative of your DNO or a partnering firm coming in and saying you have to sit in the dark, go and light a candle. We'd like to use your small lighting system in your home for flexibility. So I think it is in the residential space. It's all about the customer convenience, not impacting on their day-to-day life, and even sharing value with you in order to get you on board for the engaging customers with flexibility in the residential space. And one example we wanted to show you is a UK startup firm called Evitiadron. I should clarify, they themselves are not a startup. They're a big LED lighting supplier, but they've come up with quite an innovative approach to lighting that does provide the ability for flexibility. So they came up with a very high quality LED lighting system that either was combined directly with an inbuilt power pack to give 3 hours of off power lighting supply, or alternatively this pack including software and a microcontroller could be added onto existing LED power supply. And the idea is this was originally pitched as a convenience and safety proposition for customers in terms of the issue if power goes off, you don't want to be stuck in the dark, you don't have to mess around with candles and the big fire risk that's often considered a very big risk in the UK. And the idea is, on a residential scale, if this is rolled out at large scale, the fact that you have these small but large volume of potentially aggregatable lighting loads which can be switched at will to and from the power pack without impacting customer convenience or comfort, because the lighting will stay on. It doesn't matter if it's coming from the grid or if it's coming from the battery pack. Certainly offers a convenient and safe approach for tapping into this potential flexibility demand for lighting in the residential sector.
And I think that what you touched on there, that aggregation of light, so on their own, the small flexibility or capacity of flexibility, and I think that probably is reflected in the poll we did earlier. 0% of you think lighting is the way forward. Yes, it is a small load, but when you have a very simple, pretty clever solution, everyone has lights. We're moving towards LEDs. This is a kind of retrofit, quite an easy retrofit solution. So then it just enables lights to be able to play in this space, and aggregating, everyone's lights provides that flexibility. So one thing that I said I would come back to is controls and software. So it really is like we've looked at the different sorts of loads, but what kind of sticks them all together, the glue in the middle, is the controls and software. But how are people doing this at the moment, and what different kind of things are being tried? So we can see 3 different types of approaches to controlling residential loads. The first is controlling loads specifically for flexibility. So, for example, Voltalis in France, there's a number of other players as well. They're specifically, controlling assets to maybe play into balancing markets. Now, there's a couple of different approaches out there. So some fit what we would call black boxes. So they're just a box that sits in the customer's home in the corner somewhere, and they have all the intelligence in, but the customer doesn't need to do anything. Others are fitting controls that give the customers information, so they give empowerment to the customer, but they kind of have little other added value. They don't necessarily give control. So from a balance in services demand response point of view, reasonably hard sale, especially if the customer has to buy the controls themselves. The second thing we're seeing is inbuilt appliance control. For example, IVT, NIMBY in Sweden. Now they have appliance level kind of automation control, and this is happening today where the markets are maybe more open. So in Sweden, dynamic time of use pricing. It will send signals to the heat pumps. They'll turn on and off, and it's more automated. So this is a good solution where there are markets that are open with that sort of dynamic pricing.
And Pip, just to jump in there, I guess it is quite interesting to note that even in markets where it's not so dynamic, it's not considered easy to access this flexibility today. Germany, for instance, with the smart ready heat pumps, there is quite a big set of residential loads out there that could be tapped into. They're just not being done today due to, I guess, market restrictions or lack of business models surrounding taking advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely, and that's where kind of the aggregation platform that we touched on in the Aviti Andron example comes in. So it's being able to aggregate these, and if the appliance is IP addressable, absolutely makes it a lot more easy. So the third is add-on controls, and what I mean here is the smart thermostats, the home energy management systems, and they're being sold for a completely different purpose. So the likes of Nest, Hive, Tardo, there's many out there, I won't list them all, but customers are choosing to buy controls for their home, and that's out of peace of mind, comfort, convenience, sort of soft factors. It's not because they're going to pay back. It's not because they're providing any sort of additional benefit apart from giving the customer control of their heating and home. So today, across Europe, really connected home type devices are not really offering or exploiting the value streams that they can. Apart from one example, which is Nest in the US, they are exploiting value streams by offering customers rush hour rewards. That's a bit of a tongue twister. There's a fourth option as well, and that's where companies are coming from, where they can see the value that flexibility could provide, and they can also see that, number three, people are buying controls for their home, and so they're kind of merging these two together, and that's the example of Tico that I spoke about earlier, and we're also seeing Fortum do a similar thing there too. So the battleground for flexibility, to finish off, these are the loads who we've touched on a few of the different types of players and the different stakeholders there. And here's just a few more examples. And today we're seeing a lot of different approaches. There's not one business model, there's not one route to market or type of partnership that is the most successful or the winning at the moment. But we can talk about a few of the interesting routes to market at the moment. So, for example, a specialist DR aggregator, Upside Energy, they're providing extra value to the existing supply chain. So they're working through manufacturers, resellers, installers, and providing, kind of saying to the supply chain, well, I can provide you extra value if I can aggregate your loads together.
And what we can really see is that it's breaking down existing or old barriers in the energy system, and people are working together through quite complex relationships at times. If we take some energy storage players like Fenicon working with a software platform, Ampart, working with Swiss utility BKW, or in the US you have SunVerge working with a solar PV manufacturer SunPower together with Con Edison in New York. So there's a lot happening out there, and we really see new entrants coming into the market, like Scott presented earlier as well. And I think a lot will happen, and these traditional barriers are going to disappear with new innovations coming into the market.
Definitely, Julian. I think that is a very good point, that it's not about going away and doing your own thing and surviving in the market. If you really want to play in the residential and wider flexibility space, it is all about partnering with the right people and being aware that if you don't get involved, if you're not doing something, then someone else certainly will, and this could impact on your business.
Absolutely. Find some friends, I think, is the message there. And I guess a few other examples, we're seeing different sorts of two-way partnerships and three-stage partnerships. So, for example, Moixa, storage provider, working with Kiwi also working with Engie. We've got another energy supplier, Fortum, working with their corporation. And we see product manufacturers working with aggregators. So, really just to demonstrate, there's lots of partnerships now, there's lots of people engaged in the market today. And I think that's the overriding message for us. It's today's market. We're not future gazing here. It's happening. So what would be really great is to get some of your views on who will make residential flexibility a big success and capture the most value. So it's the last poll of the day, and I think this would be a great one to finish on. So we've just talked through a few of the different sorts of stakeholders. We've given you 4 options and other. If you do put anything in other, just pop in the question field who you think the other is, and that obviously can be anyone.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting to see how people are voting. I mean, quite a few of you have already casted your vote. It seems to be that the traditional or the obvious example, the aggregators, are in the lead, but energy suppliers are, got a good proportion, and we do see them potentially in a good position to take advantage of this. But they are not always the most of nimble organizations, so we'll see how that pans out. We've got about 80% of you voted. In the interest of time, I think we'll close the poll in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, so I guess I can certainly understand that many of you have gone for the traditional players, be it the aggregators or the energy suppliers, and yeah, I suppose that's just the limit of this poll. You can't put down that there'll be different partnerships that will be required, because I'm sure none of us think that each of these firms has all the skills, has all the answers. So I guess based on this response, it seems to show that many of these different players will have to work together potentially, and it's not a one-horse race.
Absolutely. So we've got aggregators here. 42% of you think that aggregators are going to, I guess, win out here.
Or at least drive the market, yeah.
Absolutely. Followed by energy suppliers. 6% of you voted other. 8% control companies, which I thought is quite interesting, and 15% product manufacturers. So the guys that make the machines and can build in the controls, only 15% of people think that actually they're going to win.
I think we'll have to check online afterwards to see whether 15% of you are actually from product manufacturers.
Yeah. Or 42% from aggregators.
Definitely.
Okay, so that kind of leads us to the end of our webinar. And thank you for joining us. We're bang on half an hour. We were just a bit over. We did start about 10 minutes late. Sorry about that. We were having a few technical hitches. We do have time for some questions, and we do really encourage you to post your questions now. Any questions that we get that we don't quite get time for, we're more than happy to have a chat with you over the phone, have a bit of a discussion. Would really like to discuss with you further. So let's go to the questions. Wow, lots of questions. This is fantastic. There's a one comment from about Voltalis' proposition that they propose that they give their controls away for free. Sorry, I was meant to say that and I did not, but their proposition, controls are free, so the customer remains informed, so that the customer doesn't have to buy the controls in the case of Voltalis. And questions?
Yeah, there's one interesting question here around cybersecurity actually, and I think this is obviously a touchy subject with a lot of customers and a lot of countries quite reluctant to give up their data. But ultimately, I think this will vary from one country to another. In Germany, people are much more reluctant to let someone come into their home and see what's happening, and in other countries, it's probably less so the case. So I think it will depend on from country to country, and it's around kind of giving the customer the confidence that you're not misusing his data. And it's quite interesting. It's something we're looking into as part of our data analytics service, which launched last month. So I'm sure if you've got questions around that, those guys would be able to help you as well.
Definitely, and I guess it's quite interesting that in this day and age, I mean, how many of you out there actually read through the terms and agreements before clicking yes to be able to access your next software or download the next program or essentially sign up for something? So I think there are certainly cases and countries that will be harder to crack than others, but I think we are tending towards a market in which people are, say, getting more comfortable with other people having access to their data. Of course, this will clearly depend on what data is being shared, but I think we are moving towards that sort of space.
I think data is an interesting question as well. Just on your point, Scott, there's hundreds of thousands of assets out there in residential flexibility, and I think, control, or not controlling that much data, but handling that sheer amount of data, it's really, more than big data, and that'll be an interesting thing there. So Another question we have, what evidence for the huge growth of the electrification of heat? Fantastic question, and one which we're at Delta EE, we love to have that sort of question because that is very our bread and butter. We have a number of heat research services that look into the evolution of heating markets across Europe and the world. So the growth in electrification, we do forecast across key markets in Europe that heat pump evolution will continue to grow. Lots of driving factors, a couple, I mean, sometimes down to pricing, sometimes in the Netherlands, for example, as I mentioned earlier, you know, they've just announced that they're moving towards electrification of heat in the long term, and that's a huge gas market that's, you know, going to completely turn around. And same with other European countries. Sometimes it's regulation drivers, sometimes it's costs, business models as well. Scott, is
definitely
something we're seeing with heat pumps in other markets and other sort of electric products.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of if you have a electric heating product or appliance that's typically not so competitive with existing products, be it gas boilers in traditional gas-heavy markets. It's all about extracting additional value or setting up a proposition so it's convenient and cheaper for the customer, be it providing heat as a service and getting around those upfront capital cost barriers due to using innovative financing and essentially giving customers the same quality of life and service just from electricity instead of gas. So I think it's certainly up in the air in different markets, but we do see a shift towards electrification with the push for improving energy efficiency and reducing dependence on gas, at least direct use of gas.
And storage as well, talking about the moving towards a more electric future. Julian, would you like to say something about the evolution of storage?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously we get a lot of questions on the energy storage topic, and it's something when we talk about flexibility, we should not ignore this. We see what we highlighted in a recent public webinar from our energy storage research service. We highlighted that we see the residential battery energy storage market across Europe growing to above 1 gigawatt hour by 2020. So that's quite significant growth. It's way more than fivefold growth from today, especially Germany leading the pack here with already over 30,000 battery storage systems installed, but also Italy, the UK and other European markets coming and catching up, but probably not reaching Germany quite. So there's a lot of growth here as well, and this will obviously just add to the flexibility landscape. But really it's not about one technology, one solution. It's the mix of them. It's evolution rather than revolution. You know, this is not going to happen from today to tomorrow, but it will take time. So really enjoyed telling you all about it today.
So thank you for the questions. We are running out of time now. We're happy to have individual discussions with you that have had questions to chat over them, but we do need to say goodbye, unfortunately. But I think from all of us, we've really enjoyed giving this webinar today. Fantastic engagement from you all with the polls as well as the questions at the end. So thank you very much for joining us today. And just for your information, today we've been talking around a couple of different research services here, which have included connected home, storage and energy services innovation. And we are due to be launching a multi-client study in the area of flexibility and demand response. So if you'd like more information about that, please get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We just had one final question. Sorry, we're supposed to be finishing, but there was a question around the presentation slides. Yes, we can make these presentation slides available. There will also be a recording on YouTube. If you would like the slides, please email one of us and we can send them through to you.
Thank you.